Khudai Khidmatgar, the servants of God. Epoha Academy production. In 1929, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan founded the Khudai Khidmatgar movement. Its founding principle was that as God needs no service, serving humanity in the name of God is equivalent to serving the God. The Pashto word Khudai Khidmatgar means the servant of God. Members of the movement were known as red shirts because of the red uniforms they wore. In this video we will discuss introduction, oath of Khudai Khidmatgars, ideological basis of the movement, strategic actions of Khudai Khidmatgars, British tactics against Khudai Khidmatgars, and conclusion. Introduction. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan non-violently mobilized to oppose the British in the Indian Northwest Frontier Province. Ghaffar Khan and the Khudai Khidmatgar movement inspired thousands of Pashtuns who were known as fierce warriors and others to lay down their arms and use civil resistance to challenge British rule. Ghaffar Khan formed the world's first non-violent army, a force of perhaps 1 lakh Pashtuns who took a solemn oath in joining the Khudai Khidmatgar movement. Oath of Khudai Khidmatgars. While joining the movement, the new members had to swear the following oath. Since God needs no service, I promise to serve humanity in the name of God. I promise to refrain from violence and from taking revenge. I promise to forgive those who oppress me or treat me with cruelty. I promise to devote at least 2 hours a day to social work. I promise to refrain from taking part in feuds and quarrels and from creating enmity. I promise to treat every Pashtun as my brother and friend. I promise to refrain from antisocial customs and practices. I promise to live a simple life, to practice virtue and to refrain from evil. I promise to practice good manners and good behavior and not to lead a life of idleness. I put forth my name in honesty and truthfulness to become a true servant of God. I sacrifice my wealth, life and comfort for the liberty of my nation and people. I will never be a party to factions, hatred or jealousies with my people and will side with the oppressed against oppressor. I will not become a member of any other rival organization, nor will I stand in an army. I will faithfully obey all legitimate orders of all my officers all the time. I will live in accordance with the principle of non-violence. I will serve all God's creatures alike, and my object shall be the attainment of the freedom of my country and my religion. I will always see to it that I do what is right and good. I will never desire any reward whatever for my service. All my efforts shall be to please God, not for any show or gain. Ideological basis. Under the influence of Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the movement advocated non-violent protests and justified their actions through an Islamic context. Khan did not find Islam and non-violence as incompatible. There is nothing surprising in a Muslim or a Pashtun like me subscribing to the creed of non-violence. It is not a new creed. It was followed 1400 years ago by the Prophet all the time when he was in Mecca. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. The Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came into this world and taught us that a Muslim is someone who never hurts anyone by word or deed, but who works for the benefit and happiness of God's creatures. Belief in God is to love one's fellow men. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Ghaffar Khan once told the Khudai Khidmatgars, "I am going to give you such a weapon that the police and the army will not be able to stand against it. It is the weapon of the Prophet, but you are not aware of it. That weapon is patience and righteousness. No power on earth can stand against it." The movement was intrinsically non-sectarian. In more than one occasion when Hindus and Sikhs were attacked in Peshawar, Khidmatgar members helped protect their lives and property. Strategic actions of Khudai Khidmatgars. The Khudai Khidmatgar movement was highly organized, with both democratic councils on the one hand and a military-like activist wing that implied a wide variety of non-violent strategic actions in their civil resistance to British rule. The movement began by founding schools and creating village improvement programs. For example, sanitation, water, and economic cooperation as a way of building capacity and preparing the people for more direct actions against British rule. The British viewed the creation of schools as an act of civil disobedience, and individuals involved were punished or imprisoned. In 1930, Ghaffar Khan began mobilizing to support the civil disobedience campaign with public demonstrations, pickets, and the creation of a parallel movement structure with democratic civilian and hierarchical non-violent military-style branches. The British responded with severe repression, which at great sacrifice often resulted in increased membership for the movement. Strategic actions of the Khudai Khidmatgars can be divided into two major categories: protests and persuasion, non-cooperation with British government. Protests and persuasion. Marches and religious processions were a mainstay of the movement's actions. Poetry, skits, and music to represent grievances and mobilize participation in the movement. Commemorations of anniversaries of repressive events such as the Qissa Khani Bazaar massacre in Peshawar, when British troops killed an estimated 200 demonstrators. Symbolic clothing. The red shirt uniform worn by participants. Fasting and hunger strikes to protest the British occupation. Speeches and lectures by Ghaffar Khan delivered at great risk in physical hardships in villages throughout the province, framing the struggle in religious terms. Ghaffar Khan founded a journal, The Pakhtun, which even when banned by the Raj, continued to publish articles on social issues, hygiene, and Islamic law. Non-cooperation actions. Boycotts of British cloth and other foreign goods. Spinning homespun cloth in solidarity with Gandhi's boycott of British cloth and efforts to construct a parallel economy. Refusing to pay taxes or rent to the British government. Non-cooperation with government administration and contracted services such as mail delivery. Use of village council or jirgas modeled after traditional tribal councils rather than government courts to settle criminal and civil cases. Creation of non-governmental schools to teach reading, writing, political awareness, cleaning, and sanitation. Designation of village officials, tax collectors, and other officials of the British Raj. Those refusing to do so were ostracized. Creation of parallel institutions and government in effect as with the non-violent army. Training of activists for struggle with military drill and exercise workshops on how to survive in prison. Strikes and boycotts, including a spontaneous general strike following Ghaffar Khan's arrest in 1930. British tactics against Khudai Khidmatgars. British troops employed a wide variety of tactics against Khudai Khidmatgar activists. Khudai Khidmatgar Musharrafdin explains the British response in the following words. The British used to torture us, throw us into ponds in wintertime, shave our beards, But even then, Bacha Khan told his followers not to lose patience. He said, "There is an answer to violence, which is more violence. But nothing can conquer non-violence. You cannot kill it. It keeps standing up. The British sent their horses and cars to run over us, but I took my shawl in my mouth to keep from screaming. We were human beings, but we should not cry express in any way that we were injured or weak." In 1930, soldiers of the Garhwal Rifles refused to fire on non-violent protests led by Khudai Khidmatgars in Peshawar. By disobeying direct orders, the regiment sent a clear message to London that loyalty of India's armed forces could not be taken for granted to enact harsh measures. However, by 1931, 5,000 members of the Khudai Khidmatgars were arrested. This was followed by the shootings of unarmed protesters in Utmanzai and a Takar massacre, followed by the Khati Khail massacre. Conclusion. Scott Bildoff writes, "Here are two words that don't often appear in the same sentence: non-violent Pashtuns." For centuries, Pashtun tribes were famed for their vendettas and feuds, for their bravery and treachery, for their unwillingness to accept outside rule. But back in 1930, tens of thousands of Pashtuns tried a path less traveled: non-violent civil disobedience. This movement, called the Khudai Khidmatgar, or Servants of God, united bickering tribes for an astounding 17 years during British colonial rule. Persuading all those Pashtuns to turn the other cheeks required a charismatic man of the people. Abdul Ghaffar Khan proved to be that man. Wearing simple clothes and traveling from village to village, the barrel-chested leader convinced one tribe at a time that the only way to improve their lives was to stop fighting each other and start resisting the British. It was not Britain's superior numbers or weapons that kept Pashtuns subjected. Instead, it was the Pashtuns themselves through endless land feuds and tribal bickering. While others called for jihad or holy war against the British infidels, Ghaffar Khan called for a reform of Pashtun culture itself. He had witnessed the repeated failures of revolts against the British Raj. Therefore, he decided that social activism and reforms would be more beneficial for the Pashtuns. To conclude, Khudai Khidmatgars adopted non-violent nationalist agitation in support of Indian independence from the British, and sought to awaken the Pashtuns' political consciousness. They faced severe backlash from the British, however they were largely successful in achieving their goals. Like and subscribe Poha Academy on Facebook and YouTube. We hope that you liked the video. Let us know in the comments.